What's up, fight fans? Welcome back to MMA Throwdown. Today we're going to take a look at one of the most important names in the history of mixed martial arts.
Any other stupid questions?
A man who has dragged the sport kicking and screaming into the public consciousness and broken down every barrier in his path along the way.
Oh my god, don't even ask me about these idiots. Who gives a shit?
UFC President Dana White is credited with growing the UFC from a taboo underground operation into the global phenomenon we see before us today. The company has been such a success that its name has become synonymous with the sport. When somebody mentions MMA, we think UFC. Back on November 12, 1993, US sports fans got their first taste of what was then known as no-holds-barred fighting, the beast that would eventually evolve into what we now call mixed martial arts. A one-night tournament between the greatest fighters from a selection of different disciplines, such as boxing, karate, sumo, and shoot fighting, live on pay-per-view, known as the Ultimate Fighting Championship. The event was an unprecedented success, leading to more and more shows. Due to its visceral nature, however, there was a stigma attached to the sport. No time limits, no athletic commissions, hair pulling, groin strikes and headbutting meant the fights looked very different to the polished product we watch on our TVs today. It wasn't long before the Ultimate Fighting Championship drew the attention of United States Senator John McCain.
The first look that I had at martial arts fight, there was people knocking them other down, sitting on top of them and smashing them in the face. There was no referee, there was nothing. It was terrible.
In 1996, McCain sent letters to all 50 US governors, asking them to ban what he famously called human cockfighting. The following year, he became chairman of the United States Senate Committee on Commerce, Science and Transportation, which oversees the cable television industry. Before long, all of the major cable television operators stopped airing UFC events. The political backlash and the public's perception forced the UFC to operate in the shadows, putting on events in places with no athletic commissions, and without any income from pay-per-views, the sport and the business was slowly dying. It needed a savior. Step forward Dana White. It was while working as a bellman in a Boston hotel that Dana White began training boxing as a hobby. He linked up with renowned boxing coach Peter Welch, who became his mentor. Soon Dana began running a boxing training program to help keep underprivileged children off the streets. After expanding his business to include teaching boxing fitness classes to housewives and businessmen, White's venture caught the attention of the Boston criminal underworld. He was paid a visit one day by a couple of associates of notorious Boston gangster James Whitey Bulger, who demanded White hand over $2,500 if he wanted to keep his business afloat.
For what? You're living here, you're doing business in our town. I never paid him. $2,500, I was 21 years old. You might as well ask me for $25,000. Right. I didn't have $2,500. So finally came down to, I got a call at my house one day and they said, either pay us the money or,
that's it.
Or whatever. I don't know. I didn't want to find out what the or would be. So I left and went back to Vegas.
White continued to work within the boxing industry in Las Vegas, training fighters out of a gym called United Champions. He was reunited by chance with a couple of old friends from his school days, Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta, the wealthy owners of Station Casinos. The three formed a tight bond and began training jiu-jitsu together under UFC fighter John Lewis. During this period, they came into contact with well-known fighters such as Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell, who both asked Dana White to become their manager. It was during a phone call with then UFC owner Bob Meyerowitz to discuss Tito Ortiz's contract that Dana White discovered just how much trouble the UFC were in financially.
I found out that the UFC was in trouble. I was talking about pay-per-view and he flipped out. He says, there is no money. I don't even know if I have enough money to put on the next event. Screaming at me. And I hung up the phone and I was like, damn. I was like, holy shit, this thing's in trouble. I just got off the phone with Bob Meyerowitz. I said, the UFC's in trouble. It was basically going out of business. I think we could buy the UFC and I think we should do it.
A deal was finalized in 2001 and the Fertitta brothers splashed out $2 million to become the owners of the UFC. Their first move was to hire Dana White as president and they handed him a 10% share in the company. At this point, the UFC was running on fumes and needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. The first step was getting the sport sanctioned by the various athletic commissions. Lorenzo, himself a former regulator for the Nevada State Athletic Commission, played a key role here. White and the Fertitta brothers worked alongside the commissions and reached agreement on such issues as unified rule sets, fighter safety standards, and medical testing. The next step was getting the sport back on television and back into people's living rooms. Dana succeeded in cutting a variety of deals with TV networks and the UFC returned to pay-per-view in September of 2001. The following year, Dana struck a deal with Fox to get the UFC onto cable television. This was a pivotal moment for the company as they began to make great strides toward being recognized as a mainstream entertainment venture. Things were certainly improving at a dramatic rate for Dana and the UFC. 2 years into their project, however, the Fertittas had invested over $40 million into the company with no return, and began to toy with the idea of cutting their losses and selling up. In one final roll of the dice, Dana approached TV networks with his next idea, a reality TV show called The Ultimate Fighter, pitching a house full of hopeful fighters against each other in a bid to win a UFC contract in the season finale. None of the networks wanted to take the financial risk of buying this unique project, but the Fertittas decided to gamble one last time. They paid $10 million to produce the show themselves and gave it to Spike TV to air for free. The gamble paid off. The ratings were through the roof and made a star of Dana White.
Do you want to be a fighter? That is my question. And only you know that. Anybody who says they don't, I don't want you here. And I'll throw you the out of this gym so fast your head will spin. It's up to you. I don't care.
The live season finale, which featured a classic fight between Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner, has gone down in folklore as one of the most important moments in the sport's history.
Here, Frank, Lorenzo, and I have gotten together and we've decided there is no loser in this fight, and we're going to offer Stephen Bonner a six-figure contract with the UFC.
Dana White signed a deal with Spike TV for a second season, and the UFC's pay-per-view numbers exploded from that moment onwards. The public's perception of the UFC as a whole had completely changed. Mixed martial arts was now a fully legal, regulated sport, and the following seasons of The Ultimate Fighter helped build more stars within the company and drive pay-per-view sales. In 2016, the Fertittas sold their shares in the UFC to talent agency WME-IMG for over $4 billion. Dana White stayed on as president and still owns a 9% share in the company. White is an instantly recognizable mainstream figure in American celebrity culture, and his unfiltered, boisterous attitude has led to some chaotic moments over the years. He repeatedly fell out with former UFC light heavyweight champion Tito Ortiz.
Is there anyone that you thought, like, man, I hope he get his ass beat tonight?
Tito Ortiz. I mean, it was very fucking.
I think I asked you that
man. When him and Chuck fought, you know, as the promoter, you're not supposed to have a rooting interest. I couldn't fucking wait to see Chuck whoop his ass.
Right.
100%. Deals have been done for months. Tito would call and say, I'm not going to show up unless you pay me another $150,000 or whatever the number was. He would do this on the regular. Tito was always the type of guy that would step over dollars to pick up dimes.
In 2011, White was approached by paparazzi outside a restaurant and asked if women would ever compete in his promotion.
When are we going to see women in the UFC, man?
Never.
Never?
Never.
Of course, the following year, Ronda Rousey signed with the UFC and kickstarted a new era in women's mixed martial arts. Many more controversies and public disagreements have littered the path of White's career, including allegations of domestic violence and public spats with fighters, journalists, and other promoters.
Yeah, I didn't see how that whole thing played out, but I heard Bob Arum and little bitch crying about it. Kim. I had to throw that in there. I fucking hate that guy.
Love him or hate him, there's no denying Dana White's fiery personality has played an integral part in turning the UFC into a mainstream sporting giant, and has helped to grow the sport of mixed martial arts into what it is today. That's all for today, fight fans. Be sure to hit that button and share the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. On to the next one.